Efforts to advance trade talks between Canada and the United States are intensifying ahead of the latest tariff deadline announced by the US president, with Ottawa now reportedly considering making concessions in return for the easing of some US tariffs. Joining us now is Dennis Darby, President and CEO at Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters and a member of the Advisory Committee on Canada-US Economic Relations. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you.
Let me start with these most recent updates that the Canadian government might be considering giving in to some trade demands from the US, including giving up some of our retaliatory tariffs, maybe even putting American booze back on our shelves. Now, all of this, of course, in an effort to stave off those new 50% tariffs that could kick in 10 days from now. How have you been viewing these developments?
Well, first of all, what we do know, and we were briefed by the minister, is that they are meeting intensely, and they are looking at really three things. So now the Canadian and U.S. delegations are now having what we'd call more technical discussions, looking at how to avoid those new tariffs, the 338s, how to get out from under the 232 sectoral tariffs, which have hurt manufacturing for almost a year. That's on steel, aluminum, automobiles, and wood products. And then also talking about what would be the future plan to renew CUSMA, the trade agreement. So we understand that the two sides are talking. They're talking about, making progress on all three of those things. So that's a good thing, because honestly, what's been hurting the sector, or the manufacturing sector, the exporting sector, is all this uncertainty. So that's what we understand is going on, and including across this weekend. I know that trade negotiators were staying in Washington this weekend.
It has been a tough year and a half for Canadian businesses. I'd imagine for the manufacturers you represent as well. We're now just 10 days away from this latest impending deadline. I know there have been many deadlines. What is the mood surrounding particularly this threat of Section 338 tariffs? Because these will be an additional 50% tariff on Canadian goods worth roughly $20 billion. Is the feeling that they would be so damaging some concessions might be worth it?
Well, first of all, they would those tariffs would be devastating to so many businesses. Interestingly, both on both sides of the border, because of course, as many people know, about 70% of what we sell to the Americans are used as inputs on American goods. So it's, when these tariffs were applied and are applied, what they're doing is they're raising the cost of American goods, because the government of the U.S. has been collecting the tariffs, whether it's paid by a Canadian company or by an American company. These are raising the prices, and so those new tariffs would be devastating to Canada's economy, but also to the U.S. So I think that's why Canada's gone in and said, "Look, this is no way to have fair trade, or having even predictable trade between the countries." And so they've gone in, and yes, what we saw when President Trump articulated this latest round of tariffs, the 338 tariffs, the three things he cited in his proclamation was Canada's counter tariffs on automobiles. They talked about alcohol on the shelves in the major provinces, and they talked about interpretation of dairy tariffs. So I think all of these things are probably on the table, but of course those negotiations go on in the room. Not with us, obviously, but for manufacturers, that uncertainty, which is driving, a slowdown in investment, a slowdown in spending money on training, obviously a slowdown in hiring. And so the uncertainty that exists, especially with this huge, wrap of tariffs coming in just a few days, if we don't make a deal, it have really added to the uncertainty in the sector. And the reason why our exports are actually down to the U.S., because a lot of companies are trying to figure out where will this all go? Will this get better? Will it get worse? So I'm hopeful that our trade negotiators and Minister LeBlanc and Ambassador Wiseman, as they reviewed this for our advisory committee, that they have the right idea. They need to get to some kind of a deal, but it's not just about the 338s. Like you started your segment, it's got to be about the other tariffs, which have been hugely devastating to manufacturing, and also about what is our long-term arrangement with the U.S. So I'm hopeful they will be successful, but we're all watching very, very carefully right now.
I won't ask you to speculate about those talks, that are happening in a room, presumably. But do you view some of these potential concessions as more or less damaging than others? We do know that, an alcohol ban, like you said, it's a major irritant for the US, though reversing that would mean bringing provincial leaders on board. Dairy farmers are pushing back against any concessions in that industry. Or would it be unwinding retaliatory tariffs further that, would be the most effective solution? Do you have any preference there?
Well, I mean, the preference would be to have predictable trade at a much lower tariff rate than we have right now. So I think the Prime Minister has been very clear. He doesn't want to make a deal, a sort of a one-off deal. I think there's a lot of impetus and a lot of support from the advisors saying you need to have a comprehensive deal. And if that requires changes to some of the actions we've taken in exchange for them dropping some of their actions, well, that might be where it ends up. When you apply tariffs like the U.S. has done, I mean, it causes inflation. It slows down, the economy. I'm really hopeful that they can come up with a comprehensive deal, not just to deal with the one-off of the 338s, but something that addresses those other larger tariffs and also addresses long-term predictability. Because the only way that business is going to start investing, manufacturers are going to start investing again, is once they know what are the rules and are those rules sustainable over time.
The value of Canada's trade with the US has dropped by almost $2 billion between the first quarter of 2024 and Q1 of this year. Could you give us a sense of how exporters are coping with this lost revenue? Are they really being able to replace customers in the US, or is there a sense, like you pointed out, that we just need to wait this out perhaps?
Well, two things. We've seen some softness in employment. So some companies have shuttered production. In some cases, temporarily laid off workers because nobody wants to make the wrong decision, especially if the tariffs get reversed. So that's what we're seeing from manufacturers. Yes, the government has talked about these big national projects. They've talked about infrastructure projects, new defense spending, and all of these are potential future, other sources of demand. But of course, in the short run, it's either relying on the supports that the government has put in place, or in some cases, companies sort of ramping down their investment. So trying to hang on while this gets sorted out. But yes, there are future demand sources like infrastructure, like military, but those take a while to come. So for now, a lot of companies are just battening down the hatches and trying to stay in business while this gets resolved.
All right, well, we'll know more in the week to come, week and a half to come. Thanks, Dennis. We leave it there for now, but we really appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
That is President and CEO of CME, Dennis Darby.